There are moments in history that defy explanation, chilling gaps in time where people vanish without a trace, leaving behind only questions and an eerie silence. Imagine waking up one day to find someone you know simply gone, their footsteps fading into nothingness, their story cut short by forces we may never understand. These unexplained disappearances haunt our collective memory, lingering like shadows at the edges of history. From entire expeditions lost in the wilderness to individuals who stepped out for a walk and never returned, these cases grip us because they remind us how fragile our grasp on reality truly is. Today, we're diving into 25 of the most mystifying vanishings the world has ever known, stories that have baffled historians, tormented investigators, and sparked theories ranging from the plausible to the paranormal. Think about the Roanoke colony, where over 100 settlers disappeared, leaving behind only a single cryptic clue carved into a tree. Or consider the tragic fate of the Franklin expedition, where seasoned explorers vanished into the Arctic's frozen wastes, their fate pieced together only through scattered bones and eerie artifacts. These aren't just footnotes in history, they're heart-stopping mysteries that challenge everything we think we know about survival, human nature, and even the supernatural. What could make an entire group of people vanish without a trace? How could someone walk into the woods or board a ship or set out on a routine journey only to become a ghost of the past? As we unravel these enigmas, you'll hear tales of forbidden islands, strange manuscripts, and whispers of otherworldly interference. Some of these disappearances have been attributed to foul play, others to natural disasters, but a handful remain utterly inexplicable, defying logic even centuries later. This isn't just a recounting of cold cases, it's an exploration of the unknown, a journey into the darkest corners of history where answers are scarce and the truth may be stranger than fiction. So settle in, because by the end of this, you'll question just how well we really understand the world around us, and whether some mysteries are meant to stay unsolved. One of the earliest and most haunting disappearances in American history began with hope and ended in eerie silence. In 1587, a group of 115 English settlers arrived on Roanoke Island, off the coast of present-day North Carolina, eager to establish the first permanent English colony in the New World. Led by Governor John White, they built homes, planted crops, and tried to carve out a life in an unfamiliar land. But when White sailed back to England for supplies that same year, war and storms delayed his return, and when he finally made it back to Roanoke in 1590, the entire colony had vanished. Not a single soul remained, no signs of struggle, no hastily abandoned belongings, just empty buildings and a single cryptic clue carved into a wooden post, the word Croatoan. Theories about what happened to the lost colonists have swirled for centuries. Some believe they integrated with the nearby Croatoan tribe, a peaceful Native American community whose name matched the carving. Others suggest they were massacred by hostile tribes or Spanish forces, though the lack of bodies or battle evidence makes this unlikely. More chilling are the whispers of supernatural intervention. Local legends speak of strange lights in the woods and ghostly figures wandering the island at night, as if the settlers were plucked from existence by forces beyond our understanding. Even today, archaeologists uncover tantalizing clues, like fragments of English pottery mixed with native artifacts, hinting at a possible blending of cultures. But the full truth remains just out of reach, buried under layers of time and speculation. What makes Roanoke so unsettling isn't just the disappearance itself, it's the way it forces us to confront how easily history can swallow entire stories whole. These weren't nameless figures, they were families, children, individuals with dreams of a new beginning. And then, without warning, they became ghosts of the past, leaving behind only a single word as their epitaph. Was Croatoan a desperate plea for help, a message meant to guide rescuers, or something far more ominous? The mystery endures, a silent echo from the shadows of history that refuses to be solved. The sea has always kept its secrets, but few maritime mysteries are as enduring or as baffling as the fate of the Mary Celeste. In December 1872, the merchant ship was spotted drifting near the Azores, its sails slightly tattered but otherwise intact. When the crew of the Dei Gratia boarded her, they found something far more unsettling than shipwreck or storm damage. The Mary Celeste was utterly abandoned. No signs of a struggle, no lifeboats missing. The crew's personal belongings, pipes, sewing kits, even a child's toys lay untouched in their quarters. Cargo barrels of industrial alcohol were still sealed below deck, and a 6-month supply of food and fresh water remained. It was as if the 10 people on board had simply vanished into thin air. What could compel an experienced captain, his family, and a seasoned crew to abandon a perfectly seaworthy vessel? Theories range from the plausible to the bizarre. Some point to the alcohol fumes, highly volatile and potentially explosive, suggesting the crew feared an imminent blast and fled in panic. Others propose a sudden waterspout or seaquake, a rare underwater seismic event that might have spooked them into lowering the lifeboat prematurely. Then there are darker speculations: mutiny, piracy, or even an encounter with a giant squid, though no evidence supports these claims. The ship's logbook, its last entry dated 9 days before discovery, offered no clues, only mundane notes about weather and course corrections. But what chills historians most isn't the lack of answers, it's the eerie normalcy left behind. A half-eaten meal still sat on the captain's table. A Bible lay open in the mate's cabin. These weren't the traces of a hurried escape. They were snapshots of ordinary life, frozen in time. Even the ship's single lifeboat was later found drifting nearby, its rope neatly cut as if lowered with care. No one has ever found a single body or heard a credible account of what happened. The Mary Celeste became a ghost story whispered in ports across the Atlantic, a cautionary tale about the ocean's uncanny ability to erase lives without explanation. Perhaps the truth is something science hasn't yet uncovered, or perhaps, like so many maritime legends, the Mary Celeste story has grown stranger with each retelling. But one thing is certain: when a ship outlives its crew, when the sea claims souls but spares their belongings, it leaves behind more than a mystery, it leaves a haunting. And over a century later, we're still peering into those empty cabins, listening for echoes that never come. Ambrose Bierce was a man who thrived on darkness both in his writing and in life. Known for his biting wit and grim short stories like An Occurrence at Owl Creek Bridge, he seemed to craft his own enigmatic ending when, at the age of 71, he vanished into the chaos of revolutionary Mexico in 1913. His last known letter, sent to a close friend, was eerily prophetic. "If you hear of my being stood up against a Mexican stone wall and shot to rags, please know that I think it's a pretty good way to depart this life." Then silence, no body, no grave, just whispers and speculation stretching over a century. Bierce had left Washington, D.C. that year, telling acquaintances he was traveling south to see the revolution firsthand. Witnesses later placed him in Texas, then in Chihuahua, where he reportedly joined Pancho Villa's forces as an observer. Some claimed he was last seen riding toward the Battle of Ojinaga, a bloody skirmish between federal troops and revolutionaries. Others insisted he'd been executed by Villa's men for spying, or by federal soldiers for being a spy. But no military records, no eyewitness accounts, no physical evidence ever confirmed his fate. Even Villa himself, when asked years later, simply shrugged and said, "I never met the man." Suicide was another theory that clung to Bierce's legacy. His life had been marred by tragedy, a bitter divorce, the early death of his son, and a growing disillusionment with humanity. His stories often revolved around death, and some scholars argue he went to Mexico seeking one last dramatic exit. Yet those closest to him dismissed the idea. His daughter insisted he wasn't the type. His letters in the months before his disappearance crackled with plans for future projects. Then there are the stranger twists. In the 1930s, a Texas journalist swore he'd met an elderly American in a remote Mexican village who claimed to be Bierce, spinning wild tales of living among indigenous tribes. Decades later, a priest reported finding a cryptic, unsigned note in a church ledger near the Texas border. "I am not dead, I am here." Could Bierce have staged his own disappearance, shedding his identity like a character from one of his stories? Or did he simply walk into the desert one day, letting the heat and the dust erase him? What makes Bierce's vanishing so compelling isn't just the mystery, it's the irony. A man who spent his career fictionalizing death became his own unfinished tale. No resolution, no closure, just a void where a life should have ended with a period but instead trailed off into an ellipsis. The writer who once penned, "Death is not the end." There remains the litigation over the estate, left behind no estate to litigate, only a legacy of questions as sharp and unanswerable as his prose. The Flannan Isles Lighthouse stands grim and solitary on a jagged rock 20 miles west of Scotland's Outer Hebrides, a place where the North Atlantic's fury meets the sky in an endless, rolling tempest. In December 1900, this lonely outpost became the stage for one of maritime history's most unsettling vanishings. When the supply ship Hesperus arrived on December 26th to relieve the three keepers Thomas Marshall, James Jucat, and Donald MacArthur, they found the lighthouse deserted. No distress signals had been sent, no lifeboats were missing, but the men were gone, swallowed by the elements without a trace. What investigators discovered inside only deepened the mystery. In the kitchen, a chair lay toppled beside the table, as if someone had risen abruptly mid-meal. A half-eaten plate of stew had congealed, still sitting untouched. The lamp was meticulously cleaned and refueled, the lenses polished, evidence of routine maintenance completed just hours before disaster struck. But it was the lighthouse's logbook that sent chills down the spines of those who read it. Entries from December 12th described hurricane-force winds and waves higher than any seen before, with Marshall noting he and Jucat had been praying as the storm battered the structure. Yet official weather records from nearby stations showed calm seas that day. Even stranger, the final log entry on December 15th was eerily mundane. Storm ended, sea calm. God is over all. Theories about the keeper's fate range from the violent to the surreal. Some speculate a freak wave common in those waters swept them off the narrow iron walkway while they secured equipment. Others suggest an argument turned deadly, with one man killing the others before tossing their bodies into the sea and fleeing, though no evidence supported this. More fanciful whispers speak of ghosts luring men into the mist or even extraterrestrial abductions, fueled by reports of strange lights seen near the Isles that winter. But perhaps the most haunting detail is this: the lighthouse door was found locked from the inside. If the men left voluntarily, why bar the door behind them? And if they were taken by force, what force could have reached them in that fortress of stone and iron? The Flannan Isles Keepers didn't just disappear, they left behind a stage set frozen in time, a silent tableau where every clue contradicts the next. Over a century later, their vanishing remains a stark reminder that even in our most guarded sanctuaries, the line between safety and oblivion can vanish in a single, unrecorded moment. Christmas Eve 1945 should have been a night of warmth and safety for the Sodder family of Fayetteville, West Virginia. But in the early hours of the morning, a fire tore through their home with unnatural speed, and by dawn, 5 of their 10 children had vanished without a trace. No bones, no teeth, not a single fragment of the remains that should have been left behind in the blaze. What began as a tragedy quickly spiraled into a decades-long mystery, one tangled in whispers of arson, organized crime, and even secret kidnappings. The details defy all logic. George and Jenny Sodder managed to escape with 4 of their children, but the other 5, Morris, Martha, Louis, Jenny, and Betty, were nowhere to be found. Firefighters claimed the blaze was so intense it cremated the children's bodies entirely, yet investigators noted bizarre inconsistencies. The house's electrical wires were found neatly cut before the fire started. A ladder the family kept propped against the house had mysteriously vanished, making rescue impossible. Most haunting of all, no skeletal remains were ever recovered, despite the fire burning out by morning, a scientific impossibility, given that house fires rarely exceed 1,500 degrees Fahrenheit, while cremation requires sustained heat over 2,000 degrees. Then came the rumors. George Sodder, an outspoken critic of local corrupt politicians and a vocal supporter of Mussolini's opposition, had received threats in the months before the fire. Some theorized the blaze was retaliation, that the children were taken as collateral. Others pointed to a deliveryman who'd warned Jenny weeks earlier, "Your house is going up in smoke and your children are going to be destroyed," a threat she dismissed as drunken rambling. The most chilling lead came years later when a photograph arrived in the mail showing a grown man who bore a striking resemblance to Morris Sodder, with a cryptic note on the back, "Louis Sodder. I love brother Frankie, ill boys, a 90,132 or 35. The family spent decades chasing shadows reports of the children being spotted in nearby cities, even a claim they'd been trafficked to Italy, but every path led to a dead end. What makes the Sodder case so unnerving isn't just the absence of evidence, it's the presence of too much evidence pointing in too many directions, a severed phone line, gasoline cans found near the property, witnesses who swore they saw the missing children in a passing car that night, looking dazed and silent. The official verdict of an electrical fire feels like a placeholder, a shrug in the face of the inexplicable. George Sodder spent the rest of his life turning his front yard into a billboard demanding answers, a plea that outlived him. To this day, the question lingers: did the fire erase those 5 young lives, or was it merely a smokescreen for something far darker? The house burned to the ground, but the truth never did. It just went missing, like the children themselves. History might remember Louis Le Prince as the father of motion pictures, if he hadn't vanished 2 years before Thomas Edison patented the kinetoscope. In September 1890, the French inventor boarded a train in Dijon bound for Paris, carrying blueprints for what could have been the world's first motion picture camera. He stepped into his compartment, waved to friends on the platform, and was never seen again. No luggage left behind, no tickets used, no body recovered. Just an empty seat where a man and his revolutionary ideas should have been. Le Prince's disappearance wasn't just tragic, it was suspiciously timed. He'd already filmed the earliest surviving moving images years before Edison's claims, and was days away from demonstrating his single-lens camera in New York. His invention threatened Edison's monopoly, and the American tycoon wasn't known for playing fair. Within months of Le Prince vanishing, Edison's team filed patents eerily similar to the missing man's designs. Even Le Prince's son later claimed his father had been removed by rivals, pointing to a mysterious visit from a stranger offering investment money just before the trip. But the intrigue doesn't end there. In 1897, Le Prince's brother-in-law, a key witness set to testify in a patent lawsuit against Edison, was shot dead in New York under murky circumstances. The official ruling, suicide, yet the gun was found 10 feet from his body with no powder burns on his hands. Decades later, a Paris police archive allegedly uncovered a faded photograph of a drowning victim from 1890 bearing a striking resemblance to Le Prince, though the records vanished before they could be verified. Was this a case of corporate sabotage, a man erased to make way for a more powerful narrative? Or did Le Prince stage his own disappearance, fleeing debts or personal troubles? The train itself offers no clues. Workers stripped and cleaned it that same evening, erasing any forensic evidence. What remains is a chilling footnote in technological history. The man who could have rewritten cinema's origin story disappeared into thin air, leaving behind only silent films and a legacy of unanswered questions. Edison got the credit, Hollywood got its myth, and LaPrince got a gravestone with no body beneath it. Sometimes the most revolutionary ideas aren't just suppressed, they're vanished. The white sands of Glenelg Beach near Adelaide should have been a place of joy on Australia Day, 1966. The sun was high, the water inviting the perfect summer afternoon for 9-year-old Jane Beaumont and her younger siblings, 7-year-old Anna and 4-year-old Grant. Their mother had left them to play while she ran a quick errand, something parents did without fear in that era. But when she returned just 30 minutes later, the children were gone. Not hiding, not wandering, gone. The only witness, a single sunbather who recalled seeing a tall, thin man with sandy hair playing with the siblings near the shore. After that, silence, no screams, no struggle, just 3 empty towels on the sand and a mystery that would haunt a nation for decades. What makes the Beaumont case so chilling isn't just the abduction itself, it's the brazenness of it. The man witnesses described didn't lurk in shadows. He charmed the children, even helping Anna change out of her swimsuit in a beachside bathroom. Jane had proudly told friends about a new friend named Harry who'd bought them snacks and promised more outings. This wasn't a crime of opportunity. It was a predator who knew exactly how to exploit trust. And by the time police launched what would become Australia's largest manhunt, every trail had gone cold. The only potential clue, a ransom note delivered weeks later, demanding money in exchange for the children's return. But the instructions were so convoluted, orders to stand in phone booths at precise times, codes written in newspaper margins, that investigators suspected a hoax. The children never surfaced. Over the years, suspects emerged like specters. The most notorious was Bevan Spencer von Einem, a convicted child murderer whose modus operandi mirrored the Beaumont case, luring victims with kindness, then vanishing them without a trace. Witnesses placed him near Glenelg that day, and his later crimes revealed a chilling preference for blonde children like the Beaumonts, but without physical evidence, the connection remained circumstantial. Other theories spiraled into the surreal. Whispers of a drifter who buried the siblings in a nearby warehouse's concrete foundation, or a German immigrant who allegedly confessed on his deathbed. None led to answers. The Beaumont disappearance didn't just break a family, it shattered Australia's innocence. For the first time, parents questioned the safety of letting children play unsupervised. Police reforms followed, including the creation of dedicated missing persons units and faster response protocols. But the greatest legacy of the case is its lingering horror. The realization that 3 vibrant lives could be erased in broad daylight, their faces frozen in time on milk cartons and billboards while the world moved on. Today, the beach where they vanished remains a place of uneasy beauty, the waves still rolling in as if nothing happened. But for those who remember, the sand will always hold footprints that end too soon. The night of October 21, 1978, started like any other training flight for 20-year-old Frederick Valentich. The inexperienced but eager pilot took off from Melbourne's Moorabbin Airport in his single-engine Cessna, heading south over the Bass Strait toward King Island, a routine 2-hour journey. But what unfolded next would etch his name into the annals of aviation mystery. At 7:12 p.m., air traffic control received Valentich's calm but puzzled transmission. There's a large aircraft below 5,000 feet. When the controller confirmed no other planes were in the area, Valentich's voice tightened. It's not an aircraft. Then came the descriptors that would haunt investigators. A metallic shape with green lights, moving at impossible speeds, hovering eerily close to his tiny plane. The final radio exchange plays like audio from a horror film. Valentich reported the object orbiting above him, his engine sputtering as if drained of power. It's not an aircraft, he repeated, static clawing at his words. Then, after 17 seconds of deafening open mic, the sound of scraping metal, a faint, unidentifiable whirring silence. No mayday, no wreckage, just empty ocean and a radar screen wiped clean of both Valentich and the unknown blip that had trailed him. Search teams scoured 33,000 square miles for days, finding only a single chilling artifact, an oil slick where his plane should have gone down. But even that clue evaporated. Tests revealed it wasn't aviation fuel, leaving no physical trace of the Cessna behind. Skeptics proposed simpler explanations. Had Valentich, disoriented in the dark, mistaken Venus for a UFO while accidentally flying upside down, a fatal error known as the leans? Yet weather records show the planet wasn't visible that night. Others suggested a secret military drone or experimental aircraft, though no agencies claimed responsibility. Then came the eerie postscripts, reports of UFO sightings along the coast that same evening, fishermen describing a pulsating green light plunging into the water. Decades later, a corroded engine block washed ashore on Flinders Island, allegedly from Valentich's Cessna. But investigators found no serial numbers, no way to confirm its origin. What lingers isn't just the mystery of a vanished pilot, but the visceral terror of that final transmission. Valentich wasn't hysterical, he was methodical, describing his tormentor with the precision of a witness trying to be believed. The base Strait had swallowed planes before, but never one pursued by shadows. Whether extraterrestrial encounter, government cover-up, or tragic misadventure, the truth remains suspended in those 17 seconds of static, a silence louder than any answer. The Ural Mountains should have been a winter wonderland for 9 experienced hikers in January 1959. Led by 23-year-old Igor Dyatlov, the group set out on what should have been a routine expedition through the snowy peaks. But when they failed to check in weeks later, rescuers uncovered a scene so horrifying, so inexplicable, that it would spawn decades of theories, from secret weapons tests to Yeti attacks. The tent was found sliced open from the inside, as if the hikers had fled in terror. Footprints led toward the tree line, some barefoot, others clad in a single sock. Then came the bodies. Dyatlov himself was discovered first, his face frozen in a silent scream, hands clutching a small birch tree as if trying to climb it. Others lay scattered across the snow, some with fractured skulls, others with ribs crushed by an unimaginable force. Most chilling of all, 20-year-old Ludmila Dubinina was missing her tongue, eyes, and part of her lips, injuries that couldn't be explained by animal predation or decay. Even the clothing of 2 victims showed traces of radiation, a detail Soviet officials hastily dismissed. The official report blamed an unknown compelling force, then sealed the files for decades, fueling suspicions of a cover-up. What could make skilled mountaineers slash their own tent and flee into -22-degree weather without shoes? Some point to infrasound low-frequency waves from wind hitting the mountainside that can induce panic. Others suggest an avalanche, though the slope was too gentle and no snow debris was found near the tent. Then there are the darker theories, secret military experiments with parachute mines or infrared deflectors gone wrong, or even a run-in with the indigenous Mansi people, though no signs of struggle supported this. But the most haunting detail isn't the wounds or the radiation, it's the expressions on their faces. Autopsy photos show not pain but sheer, unfiltered terror. Whatever they saw in those final moments was so horrifying, it overrode every survival instinct. Decades later, declassified documents revealed that Soviet helicopters had been spotted in the area that night, and some hikers' diaries mentioned strange orange spheres in the sky days before their deaths. The truth may lie buried in still classified KGB files, or perhaps it's something science can't yet explain. One thing's certain, Dyatlov Pass doesn't give up its secrets easily. Even the mountain's name now echoes with warning. Locals call it Dead Mountain, a place where the wind sounds like screaming and the snow never quite covers the pass. The ocean has claimed countless lives, but few vanishings have shaken a nation like the disappearance of Australia's 17th Prime Minister. On December 17, 1967, Harold Holt, a fit 59-year-old avid swimmer, waded into the surf at Cheviot Beach near Melbourne with two friends. The waves were rough that afternoon, but Holt was no novice. He'd spent years diving off these very shores. Witnesses watched him plunge into a deep channel, then lose sight of him as a swell rolled through. By the time they raised the alarm, the current had swallowed him whole. No cries for help, no flailing arms, just an empty horizon where a world leader had been moments before. What followed was one of the most intensive search operations in Australian history. Navy divers scoured the seabed for weeks. Helicopters traced the coastline. Even local fishermen joined the hunt, dragging nets through the undertow. But the ocean yielded nothing, not a shred of clothing, not a single personal effect. The official inquest concluded Holt had drowned, yet the lack of a body fueled conspiracy theories that persist to this day. Some whispered he'd staged his own death to escape political pressure, citing his slumped approval ratings and a looming leadership challenge. Others speculated darker forces were at play, that Holt, a vocal supporter of the Vietnam War, had been assassinated by Cold War operatives. Soviet defectors later claimed he'd been snatched by a Chinese submarine, though naval records show no foreign vessels in the area. Then there were the bizarre personal angles. Holt had visited a psychic months earlier who'd warned him to beware of dark water. His wife, Zara, seemed eerily composed at the memorial service, leading some to question whether she knew more than she let on. Even the beach itself seemed cursed. Cheviot's name came from a steamship wrecked there in 1887, a detail that felt like grim foreshadowing. Decades later, declassified documents revealed Holt had been carrying sensitive defense papers about a proposed Australian nuclear program, though whether this played any role remains pure conjecture. What makes Holt's vanishing so haunting isn't just the unanswered questions, it's the way it forced a country to confront the fragility of power. This wasn't some anonymous fisherman lost at sea. It was a man who'd shaken hands with presidents, who'd stood beside Lyndon Johnson just days earlier, solidifying Australia's alliance with America. The ocean didn't care. It took him as indifferently as it might take a piece of driftwood. Today, the beach where he disappeared remains unmarked, the waves rolling in as they always have. But dive beneath the surface, and you'll find his legacy cemented in Australian lore, not just in the Harold Holt Memorial Swimming Centre, but in the lingering sense that sometimes even the most visible figures can vanish without a trace. The house on East Delmer Street in Springfield, Missouri, looked perfectly ordinary on the morning of June 7, 1992, just another suburban home with its garage door slightly ajar. But inside, something was terribly wrong. 19-year-old Susie Streeter and her friend Stacy McCall, both fresh high school graduates, had spent the night celebrating with friends after attending a graduation party. When Susie's mother, 47-year-old Cheryl Levitt, didn't show up for work the next day, concerned friends stopped by. What they found was a scene straight out of a nightmare. The front door was unlocked. A broken porch light dangled from its socket. Inside, purses sat neatly lined up by the couch, car keys still tucked inside. Cigarettes had been extinguished halfway in an ashtray, as if someone left mid-smoke. And most chilling of all, 3 pairs of women's shoes sat by the door, untouched. Susie, Stacy, and Cheryl had vanished without a trace. The one potential clue was as baffling as it was frustrating. Cheryl's answering machine, which should have held messages from that night, had been completely erased, an act that required pressing a specific sequence of buttons, suggesting someone familiar with the device. Police later revealed the tape wasn't just deleted. It had been rewound to the beginning, an odd detail that hinted at deliberation rather than panic. Had the abductor left a damning message, or were they silencing a cry for help? The lack of forced entry pointed to someone the women knew, or at least trusted enough to let inside. Yet no fingerprints, no DNA, no sign of struggle tainted the scene. It was as if the trio had simply dissolved into the thick Missouri night. theories swirled like storm clouds over Springfield. Some investigators suspected a local serial killer, pointing to the unsolved murders of 2 other young women in the area just months earlier. Others zeroed in on a drifter named Robert Craig Cox, a convicted kidnapper who'd bragged to cellmates about knowing what happened to those 3 bitches in Springfield. But without physical evidence, leads evaporated. Then there were the eerie, unverified sightings reports of the women being spotted at a nearby truck stop, their faces blank and movements sluggish as if drugged. One psychic claimed they'd been buried beneath a parking garage, prompting a futile dig that yielded nothing but dust and disappointment. What makes this case so unsettling isn't just the mystery, it's the violation of that most basic human sanctuary, home. These women weren't lost in the wilderness or vanished at sea. They were taken from where they should have been safest, their absence punctuated by those silent shoes by the door, the half-smoked cigarettes, the blank answering machine tape whispering of erased voices. Today, the house still stands, its new owners unaware of the shadows that linger in its walls. But drive through Springfield, and you'll find reminders everywhere, billboards that still plead for answers, faded flyers in diner windows, the unshakable sense that somewhere, someone knows exactly what happened in those early hours of June 7th. The truth is out there, it's just waiting to be played back. The swinging rhythms of Glenn Miller's big band defined an era, his trombone and arrangements providing the soundtrack to World War II for millions of Allied soldiers. But on December 15, 1944, the music stopped abruptly. Boarding a single-engine plane in England bound for newly liberated Paris, where he was scheduled to perform for troops, the 40-year-old bandleader took off into fog so thick, ground crew lost sight of the aircraft within seconds. Neither Miller nor the plane was ever seen again. The official explanation, a combination of bad weather and engine failure, sent the craft plunging into the icy English Channel. But whispers of a far stranger fate began almost immediately, rumors that Miller never boarded that plane at all, that his disappearance was an elaborate cover-up for a scandalous death in a Parisian brothel. The crash theory holds weight. That December was one of the coldest on record, with freezing fog blanketing the channel. Pilots reported severe icing on wings, and Miller's small Nordine Norseman, a rugged but notoriously tricky aircraft, was ill-suited for such conditions. Adding to the tragedy, investigators later learned that over 150 Allied bombers, returning from a failed mission that same afternoon, had jettisoned unused explosives into the channel along Miller's flight path. Could his plane have been struck by falling bombs or caught in the shockwave of a detonation? No wreckage was ever recovered, but the channel's shifting currents and depths make such discoveries vanishingly rare. Then there's the brothel story. In 1945, a U.S. military newspaper ran a shocking obituary claiming Miller died of a heart attack in the arms of a Parisian prostitute, prompting officers to fabricate the plane crash to spare his family shame. The source, a self-proclaimed witness who changed key details under questioning. Most damningly, Miller's bandmates testified to watching him board the Norseman, and flight logs confirm his takeoff. Yet the rumor persists, fueled by the absence of a body and the military's reluctance to release certain records. Even famed jazz critic Leonard Feather stoked the fire, insisting Miller's widow received mysterious phone calls for years from men claiming to have seen him alive. Perhaps the truth lies somewhere in between. Declassified documents reveal Miller was more than just a musician. He'd been recruited to boost morale through covert psychological operations. Some speculate he knew too much about Allied plans, making him a target. Others point to an odd coincidence. The plane's pilot, John Morgan, had survived 3 previous crashes. Was that luck or something more sinister? What's undeniable is the hole Miller left in music history. His iconic sound, smooth, precise, effortlessly joyful, was silenced in an instant, a final note held too long before fading into silence. The channel keeps its secrets well, but in smoky jazz clubs and crackling old records, Glenn Miller plays on, forever suspended between disappearance and immortality. Vermont's Green Mountains are known for their lush forests and peaceful hiking trails, but nestled in the southwest corner of the state lies a stretch of wilderness with a far darker reputation. Since the 1940s, this area, dubbed the Bennington Triangle, has been the backdrop for a string of disappearances so bizarre, they've fueled theories ranging from serial killers to supernatural vortexes. The most famous case began on December 1, 1946, when 18-year-old Paula Weldon, a sophomore at Bennington College, set out for a short hike along the Long Trail. Dressed in a bright red jacket and sturdy hiking pants, she asked a passing couple for directions before striding into the trees. Moments later, a group of hunters spotted her rounding a bend, and then she was gone. Search parties combed the area for weeks, scouring every ravine and creek bed. Bloodhounds picked up her scent only to lose it abruptly, as if she'd been plucked from the trail. Stranger still, not a single item of clothing, not even that unmistakable red jacket, was ever found. The terrain wasn't particularly treacherous. Paula was an experienced hiker, and the weather had been clear. Yet the case went cold, leaving investigators baffled. But Paula's vanishing was just the beginning. Over the next decade, 4 more people disappeared under equally eerie circumstances within the same 25-mile radius. Take the case of James Tedford, a war veteran who vanished from a moving bus in December 1949. Witnesses swore he'd been asleep in his seat moments before the bus pulled into Bennington Station. When the doors opened, his belongings, including a bus ticket stub and an open newspaper, remained neatly arranged, but James had evaporated. Then there's 8-year-old Paul Jepson, who disappeared in October 1950 while his mother's back was turned for mere seconds near a truck stop. Search dogs traced his scent to the highway before it simply ended, as though he'd been whisked away mid-step. What connects these cases? Locals whisper about the area's unnatural energy, stories of sudden fog banks that roll in without warning, compasses spinning wildly, and hikers reporting an eerie sensation of being watched. Some point to the region's indigenous legends, which speak of a vengeful spirit called the Bennington Monster that snatches trespassers. Others speculate about geological oddities, like magnetic anomalies or energy vortexes similar to those alleged in Arizona's Sedona. Even scientists can't entirely dismiss the strangeness. The triangle sits atop intersecting fault lines, which some researchers suggest could produce infrasound waves capable of triggering disorientation or panic. Yet the most chilling theory isn't supernatural at all. Could a skilled predator have exploited the area's isolation? In Paula's case, detectives questioned a suspicious groundskeeper at a college, but without evidence, he was released. Decades later, an anonymous letter surfaced claiming the writer had seen Paula being forced into a car, but it was postmarked from a psychiatric facility, and the lead went nowhere. The truth may lie buried in the dense undergrowth of Glastonbury Mountain, where the trees swallow sound and the trails seem to shift when no one's looking. The Bennington Triangle doesn't just hide bodies, it erases stories, leaving behind empty spaces where lives should be. And with each passing year, the whispers grow louder, that whatever took Paula, James, and Paul isn't finished yet. Colonel Percy Fawcett wasn't just any explorer, he was a man obsessed with a legend. By 1925, the British adventurer had already survived multiple expeditions into the uncharted Amazon, mapping deadly rivers and documenting tribes unknown to the outside world. But his final journey wasn't about geography, it was about uncovering a lost city he called Z, a place he believed rivaled the grandeur of El Dorado. On May 29th, accompanied only by his eldest son Jack and Jack's childhood friend Raleigh Rimmel, Fawcett ventured into the Brazilian jungle near the Xingu River. His last known message, dispatched by a native guide, read, "We hope to get through this region in a few days. You need have no fear of any failure." Then silence. Fawcett had left strict instructions. If his team didn't return, no rescue party should follow. He knew better than anyone how the Amazon swallowed the unprepared. Yet over the next 2 decades, more than 100 would-be rescuers vanished or died trying to find him, earning the region its grim nickname, the Green Hell. Some searchers claimed fragments of evidence, a brass nameplate, a compass later proven fake, while others returned with eerie stories from local Kalapalo tribespeople who spoke of 3 white men being killed after insulting a chieftain. But the most compelling clue emerged in the 21st century, when satellite imagery and ground-penetrating radar revealed the remains of large, ancient settlements near Fawcett's last known coordinate. These weren't the fabled Golden Towers of Z, but they proved the Amazon had once hosted complex civilizations, just as Fawcett insisted. What makes this disappearance so haunting isn't just the mystery, it's the tragic irony. Fawcett dismissed indigenous accounts of deadly tribes as superstition, convinced his reputation would protect him. He carried no modern equipment, relying instead on sextants and sheer willpower. Yet modern researchers now believe the very people he underestimated may hold the answer. In 2005, a Kalapalo elder shared an oral history passed down through generations that 3 outsiders had been adopted by the tribe, then executed when Fawcett, delirious with fever, struck a warrior. A skeleton found in the 1990s near the village matched Fawcett's height and dental records, but DNA tests proved inconclusive. The truth may lie somewhere between legend and science. Fawcett's Z was almost certainly Kuhakugu, a recently discovered cluster of pre-Columbian ruins showing evidence of palisades and roads, exactly what he described in his journals. But the man himself, the Amazon, doesn't give up its dead easily. His final note, scribbled in pencil on a scrap of paper, said it best: "If with all my experience we can't make it, there's not much hope for others." The jungle listened, and it kept him. The USS Cyclops was a hulking titan of steel, a 500-foot-long Navy collier tasked with hauling coal and cargo across the Atlantic during World War I. But in March 1918, this massive vessel, along with its 306 crewmen, vanished without a trace while sailing from Barbados to Baltimore. No distress signals, no wreckage, not even a single life preserver bobbing in the water. To this day, it remains the single largest loss of life in U.S. naval history, not directly tied to combat, a mystery so profound it helped cement the legend of the Bermuda Triangle. What makes the Cyclops' disappearance so unsettling is the sheer scale of it. This wasn't a small yacht or a rickety fishing boat. It was a military-grade behemoth with reinforced hulls and state-of-the-art radio equipment. Captain George Worley, a seasoned but notoriously temperamental officer, had reported smooth sailing in his last communication. Yet when the ship failed to arrive on schedule, the Navy launched a search so exhaustive it spanned nearly 1 million square miles of ocean. They found nothing. Not so much as an oil slick. Even the weather had been cooperative, with calm seas and clear skies reported along the Cyclops' intended route. Theories about the ship's fate range from the plausible to the paranormal. Some point to the vessel's unique design flaws. Its unbalanced cargo loading system made it prone to listing, and previous crews had nicknamed it a floating coffin. Others suggest a catastrophic structural failure, as the Cyclops' sister ships suffered similar hull cracks years later. Then there's the manganese ore theory. The ship was carrying 10,000 tons of this dense mineral, which can liquefy unexpectedly in transit, potentially capsizing the vessel in minutes. But the Bermuda Triangle's shadow looms large over this case. The Cyclops disappeared near the western edge of this infamous zone, where compasses allegedly spin and ships vanish into thin air. Skeptics dismiss such tales, yet even the Navy's official report admitted the cause was unknown. Adding to the intrigue, Captain Worley's erratic behavior before departure, reportedly refusing to follow standard safety protocols and acting paranoid, has fueled whispers of sabotage or even mutiny. Some researchers speculate the ship fell victim to a German U-boat, though wartime records show no U-boat activity in the area at the time. Perhaps the most haunting detail comes from the families left behind. Several crew members' relatives reported vivid, simultaneous dreams of the ship sinking in a massive whirlpool, an eerie collective premonition that defies explanation. Even President Woodrow Wilson, when pressed for answers, could only say, "Only the sea knows." Over a century later, the USS Cyclops remains a ghost ship in the truest sense. No wreck, no graves, just an empty stretch of ocean where 306 souls slipped through history's fingers. Whatever happened in those final moments, the Atlantic has kept its secret well. On a stormy November evening in 1971, a man calling himself Dan Cooper, later misreported as D. B. Cooper boarded Northwest Orient Airlines Flight 305 in Portland, bound for Seattle. Dressed in a crisp business suit and dark sunglasses, he seemed like any other mid-40s passenger until he handed the flight attendant a note claiming he had a bomb. What unfolded next was a meticulously planned heist that would become the only unsolved case of air piracy in U.S. history. After demanding $200,000 in cash and 4 parachutes upon landing in Seattle, Cooper released the passengers, then ordered the plane back into the sky with instructions to fly toward Mexico at a dangerously low altitude. Somewhere over the rugged wilderness of the Pacific Northwest, he lowered the rear stairs and leapt into the night with the money strapped to his body, vanishing into legend. The clues left behind only deepened the mystery. In 1980, a boy digging along the Columbia River uncovered 3 bundles of Cooper's ransom money, $5,800 in decaying 20s, proving at least part of the cash had landed there. But no parachute, no clothing, and crucially, no body was ever found. Investigators initially suspected Cooper didn't survive the jump. The freezing temperatures, fierce winds, and dense forest below made survival unlikely. Yet no remains were discovered despite decades of searches, fueling theories that the hijacker had either meticulously planned his escape route or met a grislier fate. The FBI suspect list read like a roster of America's most colorful eccentrics. There was Richard McCoy Jr., a Vietnam vet and skilled parachutist who pulled off a nearly identical heist months later, but was later ruled out by fingerprints. Then came Kenneth Christiansen, a former Northwest employee with insider knowledge, whose financial records showed suspicious deposits after the hijacking. Most intriguing was Barbara Dayton, a transgender pilot and outdoorswoman who allegedly confessed to friends that she'd orchestrated the crime as revenge for workplace discrimination. Each theory crumbled under scrutiny, leaving investigators chasing shadows. What makes Cooper's disappearance so tantalizing isn't just the audacity of the crime, it's the way it exposed the fragility of air travel security in that era. Before metal detectors and reinforced cockpit doors, a single determined individual could exploit the system with little more than a threatening note. The case also sparked a cultural obsession, inspiring copycats, conspiracy theories, and even a folk hero narrative that painted Cooper as a Robin Hood figure. But the truth is far murkier. Did he perish in the jump, his body hidden under decades of moss and ferns? Was he a professional who'd planned every detail, slipping away to a new life under an assumed name? Or was the answer even stranger, buried in one of the countless false leads and dead ends that still haunt the FBI's files? The only certainty is the enduring allure of the mystery. Every few years, a new piece of evidence surfaces: a tattered parachute in a barn, a cryptic deathbed confession, but none have cracked the case. Even the recovered cash raised more questions than answers. Why only 3 bundles? Did Cooper drop them accidentally, or was it a deliberate misdirection? The Columbia River's currents could have carried the money for miles, leaving the actual landing zone forever unknown. Like the man himself, the truth remains suspended somewhere between myth and reality, falling through the night sky just beyond our grasp. The backroads of Yuba County, California, were familiar territory for 5 close friends: Bill Sterling, Jack Madruga, Ted Weiher, Jack Hewitt, and Gary Mathias. All 5 men had developmental disabilities, but they were far from helpless. They attended local basketball games together, held steady jobs, and navigated public transportation with ease. But on the night of February 24, 1978, after driving to a college basketball game in Chico, they made a series of baffling decisions that would lead to one of the most perplexing mass deaths in American history. Their borrowed car was found 2 days later, abandoned on a remote logging trail in the Plumas National Forest, miles off course and nearly 4,000 feet higher in elevation than their intended route home. The vehicle was stuck in the snow, its battery dead, but the real mystery lay in what investigators found inside. The heater was still functional, and the gas tank was nearly full, with enough fuel to drive over 100 miles. More unsettling, footprints leading away from the car showed no signs of panic or struggle. The men had simply walked into the freezing wilderness wearing only light jackets, as if they believed help was just around the bend. The first body turned up weeks later. Ted Weiher, the oldest of the group at 32, was discovered in a U.S. Forest Service trailer nearly 12 miles from the car. He'd been dead for over a month, his emaciated body wrapped in 8 makeshift blankets, some still neatly folded nearby. The trailer's pantry was stocked with enough food to last months, yet Weiher had starved. Stranger still, a working propane heater sat unused just feet from his body, and a pair of his friend's glasses were found neatly placed on a shelf, as if waiting for their owners. The other 4 men were scattered across the mountainside. 2 had succumbed to hypothermia within a day of leaving the car. Mathias, the only one with a history of mental illness, was never found at all. The official explanation points to hypothermia-induced confusion, a condition where victims paradoxically remove clothing or ignore survival tools as their brains succumb to cold. But locals and investigators alike can't shake the inconsistencies. Why drive up a treacherous mountain road in the first place? Why abandon a warm car with ample gas? And most hauntingly, why did Weiher, who'd survived weeks longer than the others, never light the heater or open the canned food? Some theories suggest foul play, pointing to Mathias's schizophrenia and rumors of a violent outburst years earlier. Others wonder if the men were lured by something or someone onto that forest road. Decades later, the case remains open, a chilling reminder that even the most straightforward environments can become labyrinths of poor decisions and unexplained choices. Perhaps the truth lies in the fragility of the human mind under duress. These weren't reckless teenagers or inexperienced hikers. They were men who'd spent years mastering the routines of independence, only to have those skills collapse in the face of panic. The mountains didn't kill the Yuba County 5. Something far more insidious did, whether it was the cold, each other, or a predator hidden in plain sight. The snow has melted, the trailer has rotted away, but the question lingers like frost on a windshield. What really happened that night in the Plumas National Forest? The answer, it seems, is buried with the men who never made it home. Amelia Earhart's final flight remains one of aviation's greatest riddles, a vanishing so enduring it's become shorthand for unsolved mysteries. On July 2, 1937, the trailblazing pilot and her navigator Fred Noonan took off from Lee, New Guinea, aiming for Howland Island, a speck of land barely a mile long in the vast Pacific. They never arrived, despite a multi-million-dollar search spanning 16 days. Not a shred of their Lockheed Electra was found, the official verdict. Lost at sea, likely crashed after running out of fuel, but for decades that explanation has felt unsatisfying, like a puzzle missing half its pieces. Recent discoveries have reignited the debate, particularly on Nikumaroro, a remote atoll 350 miles southeast of Howland. In 2024, marine archaeologists uncovered aircraft debris matching the Electra's aluminum panels near the island's reef. Even more compelling, a sextant box identical to Noonan's model was found in a long-abandoned village alongside fragments of a woman's shoe and cosmetics jar from the 1930s. These artifacts align with a theory first proposed in the 1990s that Earhart and Noonan made an emergency landing on Nikumaroro's shallow reef, survived for weeks as castaways, and ultimately perished there. The crash theory, while plausible, struggles to explain the eerie radio signals picked up for days after their disappearance. Ham operators as far away as Texas reported hearing distress calls signed Earhart, describing running aground and Noonan's injuries. One particularly chilling transmission logged on July 6th included the phrase "partly on land, partly in water," consistent with Nikumaroro's tidal flats. Skeptics dismiss these as hoaxes, but the signal's technical details, like the frequency and Earhart's call sign, were verified as authentic by contemporary radio experts. Then there's the alternative, more sinister angle, capture by Japanese forces. Some researchers point to classified World War II-era documents suggesting Earhart's plane was spotted in the Marshall Islands, then under Japanese control. A grainy photo from 1937, later dug up in U.S. archives, appears to show a white woman and man on a dock, their faces blurred but bearing a haunting resemblance to Earhart and Noonan. Could they have been taken as spies during Japan's military expansion? The theory gained traction when a Saipan Islander claimed in the 1980s to have witnessed the execution of a woman pilot in Japanese custody, though no physical evidence has ever surfaced. What makes Earhart's disappearance so endlessly fascinating isn't just the unanswered questions, it's the collision of hope and science. Bone fragments found on Nikumaroro in 1940 were initially dismissed as belonging to a man, but modern analysis suggests they're likely female and of European descent. A jar of freckle cream unearthed near the sextant box hints at a woman's presence. Earhart famously loathed her freckles. Even the coral-encrusted aluminum panels bear stress marks consistent with a hard landing, not a high-impact crash. Each clue feels like a whisper from the past, just loud enough to keep us searching. Perhaps the truth lies somewhere between these theories. Maybe the Electra did ditch near Nikumaroro, its occupants surviving long enough to send those faint radio pleas before the island's harsh conditions or Japanese patrols sealed their fate. Or maybe the ocean simply swallowed them whole, leaving only ghosts and static in their wake. Whatever happened on that July morning, Earhart's legacy endures, not just as a pioneer who vanished, but as a reminder that some horizons remain stubbornly out of reach, no matter how far we fly. One of the creepiest artifacts in missing persons history surfaced in a Florida parking lot in 1988. A grainy Polaroid depicting a young woman and boy bound and gagged in the back of a van, their eyes wide with terror. What turned this snapshot from a potential prank into a national sensation was the resemblance between the woman and Tara Calico, a 19-year-old from Belen, New Mexico, who'd vanished a year earlier while biking near her home. The photo's discovery reignited her case, but it also plunged investigators into a labyrinth of hoaxes, dead ends, and chilling possibilities about who or what might have been captured in that fleeting moment. Tara's disappearance on September 20, 1987, had already baffled authorities. An avid cyclist, she'd taken her usual route along New Mexico State Road 47 when witnesses reported seeing a light-colored pickup truck tailing her. Minutes later, her smashed Sony Walkman and a broken cassette tape were found scattered on the pavement, but Tara was gone. Searchers turned up nothing until that Polaroid surfaced 9 months later, 3,000 miles away in Port St. Joe, Florida, the woman's short brown hair, the distinctive birthmark on her leg, even the book beside her V.C. Andrews, My Sweet Audrina, Tara's favorite author, every detail seemed to scream her name. Yet the boy beside her, his face partially obscured by tape, remained unidentified, deepening the horror. Forensic analysts were divided. Some argued the birthmark's placement matched Tara's exactly. Others dismissed it as coincidence, noting the photo's poor resolution. The FBI's original statement deemed it likely authentic, but later analyses tilted toward hoax. Then came the confessions. A Georgia man's claim that he and his girlfriend staged the photo as a joke, even demonstrating how they'd recreated the bindings. Yet his story unraveled under scrutiny. The Polaroid's manufacturing date predated Tara's disappearance, suggesting it wasn't a recent prank. Meanwhile, Tara's mother insisted the birthmark was irrefutable, telling reporters, "That's my daughter's leg. I'd know it anywhere." The photo's true nightmare fuel lies in its implications. If genuine, it suggests Tara was alive for months after her abduction, enduring unimaginable horrors. If fake, it's one of the cruelest hoaxes in true crime history, weaponizing a family's grief for attention. Sheriff's deputies in Florida initially treated it as a trafficking clue, noting port scent. Joe's proximity to highways used by smuggling rings. Yet no database ever matched the boy in the photo, leaving his fate and Tara's shrouded in doubt. Decades later, the Polaroid remains an enigma, preserved in evidence lockers and true crime forums alike. Modern facial recognition software can't conclusively link it to Tara, and the original has degraded, taking potential answers with it. What lingers isn't just a question of authenticity, but of how easily a single image can fracture into countless truths. For Tara's family, it's a ghost that refuses to fade. For the rest of us, it's a visceral reminder that some stories don't end with closure. They end with a flashbulb's burst, freezing terror in a frame forever. The sands of the Syrian desert hold more than just the scorching heat. They swallow history whole. In 53 BC, one of Rome's most humiliating military disasters unfolded near the dusty town of Carrhae, where the seasoned general Marcus Licinius Crassus led 40,000 legionnaires against the Parthian Empire. What should have been a decisive Roman victory turned into a slaughter. Parthian horse archers, masters of hit-and-run tactics, picked apart Crassus's forces under the relentless sun. By battle's end, Crassus lay dead, his skull allegedly used as a prop in a Parthian victory play. But the real mystery wasn't the defeat, it was the fate of 10,000 survivors who vanished without a trace after surrendering. Ancient historians like Plutarch recorded their capture, then silence. No prisoner exchanges, no ransom demands, just 10,000 highly trained soldiers evaporating into the Persian winds. The most tantalizing theory suggests these legionnaires didn't perish, they were relocated to the empire's eastern frontier as slave soldiers. Centuries later, Chinese chronicles from the Han Dynasty describe a bizarre encounter near the Tarim Basin. In 36 BC, during a skirmish with nomadic Xiongnu tribes, Chinese forces reportedly faced enemy troops using fish scale formation tactics, a near-perfect replication of the Roman testudo or tortoise formation. Even stranger, these warriors carried oblong shields and wielded short swords in a style foreign to the region. The Chinese account notes their fierce eyes and reddish hair, features uncommon among Central Asian peoples but strikingly similar to descriptions of Roman auxiliaries. Archaeology adds weight to the legend. In the 1990s, DNA testing on residents of Liqian, a remote Chinese village in Gansu province, revealed an unexpected percentage of Caucasian genetic markers. Further excavations unearthed artifacts resembling Roman military equipment, including a bronze helmet fragment with design elements matching 1st century BC legionary gear. Local folklore insists the village was founded by foreign mercenaries who settled there after being stranded. Skeptics argue these could be remnants of Silk Road traders, but the timing aligns too neatly with the Carrhae disappearances. What makes this mystery so compelling isn't just the possibility of Romans marching into ancient China, it's the human story buried beneath the speculation. These were men ripped from their homeland, forced to march thousands of miles into the unknown. If the Lycian connection holds, their descendants might still walk among us, carrying fragments of Roman bloodlines in their DNA. The Parthians, notorious for deporting skilled captives to buffer zones, could have sent the legionnaires east to guard against nomadic invasions. Over generations, Latin would have faded, Roman gods replaced by local deities, but the muscle memory of combat drills, the testudo formation, the gladius thrust might have endured like ghostly echoes. Yet doubts linger. No Roman records mention such a mass relocation. No Persian tablets detail the prisoner's fate. The fish scale formation could have been a coincidental tactical parallel. Even the Lycian DNA, while intriguing, might trace back to later contacts with Teucherian or Sogdian traders. But absence of evidence isn't evidence of absence, especially when dealing with ancient Silk Road migrations, where histories were written by the victors and the lost seldom left epitaphs. The truth may lie scattered across the Eurasian steppe, buried in unread manuscripts or hidden in the genetic code of villagers who still carry the legacy of forgotten legionnaires. Whether myth or reality, the Lost Legion's tale endures because it speaks to our fascination with survival against impossible odds. 10,000 men didn't just vanish, they stepped into the shadows of history, leaving behind whispers in Chinese chronicles and rusted helmet fragments in the dirt. The desert at Carrie kept its secrets, but halfway across the world, the wind still carries traces of a story too strange to dismiss entirely. Perhaps that's the final irony. Rome's missing soldiers became part of a greater tapestry, woven into the legends of empires they never knew existed. Modern investigations into the Flannan Isles vanishings have turned from folklore to forensic science, peeling back layers of myth to expose chilling possibilities rooted in the natural world. One compelling theory gaining traction among oceanographers points to rogue waves, those freakish walls of water that can rise without warning, dwarfing even the tallest lighthouses. Photographic surveys of the island's cliffs reveal scars from waves reaching nearly 200 feet, forces capable of sweeping men off the iron walkway like dust from a table. Computer simulations now show how a single Three Sisters wave sequence, a trio of massive swells, could have pummeled the keepers during routine equipment checks, explaining why the entrance door was found locked from the inside. If the men rushed out to secure gear as a monster wave approached, their bodies would have been launched into the churning void before they could react, leaving no time for distress signals or final log entries. Psychological research adds another eerie dimension to the mystery. Isolation psychosis, a documented phenomenon affecting those stationed in extreme remote locations, could explain the erratic weather log entries describing non-existent storms. Studies of modern lighthouse keepers in similarly desolate posts describe vivid hallucinations, time distortion, and shared delusions where groups collectively experience events that never occurred. The Flannan Isles crew, cut off for weeks by winter storms, might have suffered a mass breakdown, fleeing their post in a fugue state induced by sensory deprivation. This would account for the untouched meal and orderly conditions. Their minds, not the sea, became the real predator. Yet the most haunting modern theory bridges science and history. Maritime historians recently uncovered 19th-century logs from passing ships describing sudden, localized tempests around the Flannans, microbursts of wind and wave activity undetectable by distant weather stations. These hyper-focused storms could have generated the hurricane-force winds Marshall recorded while neighboring areas remained calm. Combined with the lighthouse's notorious acoustics, its design amplified wind noises to deafening levels. This creates a plausible nightmare scenario. Imagine the keepers, convinced a catastrophic storm was upon them, abandoning their posts in terror only to step into a tranquil night claimed by the sea's cruel illusions. The truth may lie in the intersection of these theories. Perhaps a rogue wave initiated the crisis, triggering isolation-fueled panic that drove the men into the ocean's maw. Or maybe the very structure built to ensure their safety became a sensory prison, warping reality until the boundary between danger and delusion collapsed. What remains undeniable is this: the Flannan Isles Keepers didn't just vanish. They were erased by forces we're only now beginning to comprehend, forces that remind us how thin the line is between human resilience and the indifferent power of nature. Their locked door stands as a metaphor for the mystery itself, sealed tight against easy answers, guarding secrets the waves refuse to surrender. Theories surrounding the Mary Celeste have evolved dramatically with modern scientific analysis, peeling back layers of speculation to reveal explanations as volatile as the ship's own cargo. One of the most compelling 21st century reevaluations focuses on the barrels of industrial alcohol in the hold, 1,900 gallons of raw ethanol, a substance far more dangerous than historians once realized. Forensic chemists now understand that such cargo could produce invisible vapor clouds capable of triggering violent pressure wave explosions without fire or visible damage. In 2018, a team at University College London recreated the conditions of the Mary Celeste's hold, demonstrating how ethanol vapors expanding in tropical heat might have blown open hatches with a force mimicking cannon fire. This wouldn't leave scorch marks or debris, but it could terrify a crew into believing their ship was moments from detonating, prompting a panicked evacuation. Even more intriguing is the methane bubble hypothesis, championed by oceanographers studying seismic activity along the Azores-Gibraltar Ridge. Sonar surveys reveal this region as a hotspot for oceanic methane vents, sudden plumes of gas rising from decomposing organic matter on the seafloor. When these bubbles reach the surface, they can create localized disturbances, swirling water, eerie sounds, even temporary buoyancy loss for ships. A 2022 study published in Marine Geology showed how methane saturation could explain the Mary Celeste's abandoned state. A dense bubble cluster passing beneath the hull might have produced violent vibrations, convincing the crew the ship was structurally failing. Worse, methane inhalation causes dizziness, paranoia, and hallucinations, symptoms matching Captain Briggs' reputedly cautious nature. Imagine seasoned sailors suddenly seeing the deck warp or hearing phantom cracks in the timbers, their judgment clouded by an invisible toxin. Yet these scientific insights don't fully untangle the mystery. If the crew fled due to an alcohol vapor incident, why were the barrels found intact and properly sealed? Methane might explain irrational behavior, but wouldn't rescuers have noticed foul-smelling air or residual gas in the cabins? Modern investigators stress that these theories aren't mutually exclusive. A combination of factors, ethanol vapors creating initial panic, then methane exacerbating disorientation, could have sparked a cascade of poor decisions. The ocean is a theater of intersecting dangers, where natural phenomena conspire in ways 19th century sailors couldn't comprehend. What lingers isn't just the puzzle of the Mary Celeste, but the chilling lesson it embodies about human perception under duress. Science can now explain how the ship's environment might have turned treacherous, but it can't recreate the sheer terror of that moment when rational mariners chose the vast, uncertain sea over their own vessel. The truth may lie not in a single cause, but in the intersection of chemistry, geology, and psychology, a perfect storm of invisible forces that turned a routine voyage into history's most enduring maritime ghost story. For decades, the Dyatlov Pass incident was shrouded in Cold War secrecy, its files buried deep in Soviet archives. But when those documents finally surfaced after the USSR's collapse, they revealed chilling new layers to the mystery, including classified military activity that may have turned a snowy mountainside into a death trap. Among the most startling revelations were records of secret missile tests conducted by the Soviet Air Force in the northern Urals during January and February 1959. Declassified memos confirm R-7 intercontinental ballistic missile launches from the Kapustin Yar test range, some timed eerily close to the hiker's disappearance. These weren't just distant fireworks. Shockwaves from high-altitude detonations could have triggered localized avalanches or created the thunderous booms described in Dyatlov's diary days before the tragedy. Even more unsettling, a formerly top-secret report noting atmospheric anomalies near Kholat-Syakh, the so-called Dead Mountain, during that period, with radiation levels spiking unpredictably. Then there's the infrasound angle. Recently unearthed KGB research from the 60s details experiments with low-frequency sound weapons capable of inducing panic, nausea, and even organ rupture at certain wavelengths. Modern acoustic physicists now recognize that the Ural Mountains' unique geology, steep slopes converging at sharp angles, can amplify natural infrasound from wind patterns, creating frequencies below 20 Hz. To the human body, these vibrations are imperceptible but devastating. They sync with brainwave patterns, triggering primal terror and disorientation. Picture the Dyatlov group, already exhausted from their trek, suddenly overwhelmed by an inexplicable urge to flee, their rational minds hijacked by an invisible force. This would explain the slashed tent, the barefoot prints in the snow, and the injuries resembling blunt force trauma without visible attackers. But the most haunting document is a 1991 deposition from a retired missile technician who claimed his unit was ordered to sanitize an impact zone near Dyatlov past days after the incident. He described finding metallic debris, not of our manufacture, and a circular patch of scorched snow measuring 30 meters across, details matching radiation burns on some victims' clothing. The Kremlin's response, a swift transfer of his entire unit to Siberia, their records purged. Whether the truth lies in missile tests, infrasound, or some catastrophic intersection of both, one thing is clear: the Soviet machine had reason to bury this story. The declassified files don't solve the mystery, they fracture it further, revealing how easily science can become weaponized and how thoroughly a mountain can keep its secrets. The Dyatlov Pass didn't just claim 9 lives, it became a cautionary tale about the dangers lurking where nature and secrecy collide. The Sodders refused to let grief turn into resignation. For decades, George and Jenny transformed their front yard into a makeshift investigation hub, plastering the property with billboards offering rewards for information about their missing children. They hired private detectives who uncovered bizarre leads, like a local woman's claim she'd seen the children bundled into a car that night, their faces pressed against the windows. One PI traced rumors of the kids being held on a farm across state lines, only to find empty rooms and nervous denials. The family even consulted psychics, one of whom insisted the children were alive in Italy, prompting George to travel there twice, chasing shadows through narrow cobblestone streets. Then came the confessions, each more chilling than the last. In the late 1950s, a dying hospital patient allegedly told his nurse he'd helped kidnap the children, claiming they'd been taken as retaliation for George's anti-corruption crusades. Another tipster swore a West Virginia businessman had paid to have the house torched after a failed blackmail scheme, though no records corroborated the story. Most haunting was the 1968 deathbed statement of a convicted arsonist who mumbled about 5 little bodies buried near Interstate 77. Police excavated the site but found only animal bones, leaving the Sodders suspended between hope and horror. What makes their quest so gut-wrenching isn't just the dead ends, it's the way tragedy became their life's work. Jenny kept the children's bedrooms untouched for years, their toys gathering dust. George obsessively recorded every tip in leather-bound ledgers, cross-referencing dates and names like a man piecing together a bomb. Even after his death in 1969, the family continued the fight. His surviving children lugged the billboards to highway rest stops, their phone number still bold beneath the words, "Missing, have you seen US?" The final twist came from beyond the grave. In 2013, a firefighter's grandson came forward with a story his grandfather had sworn him to secrecy about, that the children's remains had been found in the ashes but were quietly disposed of to spare the family further pain. Forensic experts quickly debunked the claim house fires don't incinerate bone completely, but it revealed the cruel duality of the case. Even decades later, people still felt compelled to rewrite its ending, stitching together rumors and grief into something resembling closure. The Sodders never got theirs. Their search outlived George, then Jenny, then whole generations. Today, the property where the house once stood is just grass and memory, but the questions remain stubborn as weeds. Why did the fire burn so hot yet leave shoes unscorched? Who erased that answering machine tape? And who, if anyone, was in the car those witnesses saw speeding away that night? The truth didn't die with the Sodders. It just went underground, waiting for someone to dig. The jungle holds its stories close, passing them down through generations like precious heirlooms. Among the Kalapalo people of Brazil's Upper Xingu region, elders still speak of the three pale strangers who walked into their territory nearly a century ago, not as conquerors but as doomed men. According to their oral histories, Fawcett's group arrived during a time of tension when neighboring tribes were warring over dwindling hunting grounds. The Kalapalo offered them shelter, but tensions flared when Fawcett, weakened by fever, allegedly struck a warrior during an argument. In a culture where such an insult demanded blood repayment, the outcome was inevitable. The elders describe a moonlit clearing where the foreigners were executed, their bodies placed in the river so their spirits couldn't walk back to torment the living. Modern archaeology adds eerie weight to these accounts. In 2005, a team from the University of São Paulo uncovered skeletal remains near a former Kalapalo village matching Fawcett's height and age. The bones showed signs of blunt force trauma to the skull, consistent with the tribe's description of clubbing. Even more telling, artifacts found nearby, a tarnished brass nameplate, fragments of a surveyor's compass aligned perfectly with equipment Fawcett was known to carry. Forensic analysis couldn't confirm a DNA match due to degradation, but the evidence formed a mosaic too precise to dismiss as coincidence. Yet some tribes tell a different story. The Cuicuro, neighbors to the Kalapalo, insist they saw Fawcett's group alive years later, living as captives of the isolated Yavalapiti. Their shamans spoke of a white man with sky-colored eyes who taught the tribe to forge metal tools, becoming something between a slave and a sorcerer. Satellite imaging in 2018 revealed abandoned Yavalapiti settlements with unusual rectangular structures, distinct from traditional round huts, fueling speculation that outsiders influenced their architecture. Could these be traces of Fawcett's doomed attempt to assimilate, or simply the remnants of other lost explorers swallowed by the green abyss? The truth may lie scattered between these narratives. What's undeniable is how Fawcett's disappearance became woven into the Amazon's living tapestry, a cautionary tale about the dangers of arrogance in a land that tolerates no masters. The jungle didn't just claim him. It absorbed his story, reshaping it through countless retellings until fact and legend became inseparable. Every rustle in the canopy, every ripple on the Blackwater rivers seems to whisper his name, a reminder that some mysteries aren't meant to be solved, only remembered. What ties these disappearances together isn't just the absence of answers, it's the eerie repetition of certain patterns, as if history itself has a blueprint for vanishing acts. Time and again, we see the same unsettling details. Locked doors left untouched, half-finished meals abandoned mid-bite, cryptic messages scrawled in moments of desperation. Whether it's the Arctic silence swallowing the Franklin expedition or the digital void where Tara Calico's Polaroid surfaced, these cases whisper of gaps in our understanding, moments where the rules of reality seem to fray at the edges. Consider the recurring theme of impossible environments, places like Dyatlov Pass or the Bennington Triangle, where the land itself feels like a predator. These aren't just backdrops to tragedy, they're active participants warping perception or hiding evidence with almost sentient precision. Then there's the haunting consistency of human error, seasoned explorers ignoring warnings, families trusting familiar roads, crews misjudging the sea's whims. It's as if each story holds up a mirror to our own vulnerabilities, reminding us how quickly certainty can dissolve. Yet the most chilling pattern might be the way these mysteries resist resolution. Despite satellites scouring jungles for faucet and algorithms analyzing Earhart's radio signals, some truths remain buried not for lack of trying, but because the universe guards its secrets fiercely. Maybe that's why we keep searching. These aren't cold cases, they're open wounds in history, pulsing with questions that refuse to scar over. Now it's your turn. Which disappearance lingers in your thoughts? Do you believe the Mary Celeste Crew fell victim to an invisible force, or is there a darker explanation? Could the Sodder Children have survived, or does the truth lie in those unmarked graves? Drop your theories or lesser-known vanishings that deserve attention in the comments below. And if you're hooked on these historical enigmas, hit subscribe. We're just scratching the surface of history's darkest riddles, and the next mystery might be the one that keeps you up at night. After all, some stories don't end, they just wait for the right person to keep digging.